It's official. Your San Francisco 49ers are the number one team in the NFC. It's debatable whether they're the number one team in the league, but if you're asking our opinion, I think that we would say that they are. We're going to recap a little bit of the 49ers Seahawks game, give you an update on Brock Purdy's production this year, and then go into some topics for the future. And we're going to do all of that next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Tuesday morning on the West Coast. It's lunchtime here on the East Coast. But that means that I've got my guy, Ryan, from the Ryan G. Hensley Show. Ryan, what's up, my man? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Cold as usual, but powering through it. It's like a cold tub. You know how they recommend cold tubs to get the juices flowing? I do that every day. That's why I'm able to accomplish so much.
Yeah, well, you just cold plunge every day. It's nice and healthy. I can see it. You're looking younger since the last time I saw you from these cold plunges you're doing out there. It's great.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I'm not volunteering for these cold plunges. It's just how it is out here in this office, man. But we're going to be okay, man. You know who's not cold? 49ers.
Who's that?
49ers.
And I knew you were going with that. I knew where you're going, and I still fell for it. It's absolutely incredible. All right, let's talk about Brock Purdy. These are the Tuesday updates. I know you post them on Twitter, but I like to get them here because I'm too lazy to read Twitter. So what are the updates for Brock Purdy this week?
Yeah, there's something special for you guys, too. I got some historical comparisons that I'll go over afterwards. But Brock Purdy's numbers this week, I do this every week. Completions, he's tied for 18th with 252, down one spot from 17 attempts, 22nd with 359, up one spot. Completion percentage second. He's really kind of first. This one's a little funny. It's because our guy, Jake Browning for the Bengals, has taken over for Burrow. He's only thrown 102 times.
He's only played 3 games. Although he's played really good for those 3 games, I don't know if I want to count him. I feel like we should do a 5-game minimum at something.
I've been waiting for 100 attempts, and so he finally crossed that threshold. So I added him this week. But yeah, there's a caveat. There's an asterisk next to this: 102 attempts versus Brock Purdy's, 359 attempts. But yeah, he's at 75.5, and Brock's, depending on how you look at it, he's either first or second at 70.2. Yards, this one jumped up.
What's Dak at? Do you know? Is he at like 70.1 or 70?
I don't have it on here.
I know he's up there too. I just wanted to know how close they were. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, Dak is cooking, man. Yards, though. Yards, he jumped up 4 spots to 3,553. He's now in 3rd place with total yards on the season, which is amazing. Average still in first, 9.9 yards per, attempt, I believe? Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, and then yards per game, 5th, up 2 spots, 273. Long, still at the same, 5th with that 76-yarder. Passing touchdowns, though, this one's crazy to me. So now Brock Purdy is tied for second with 25, tied with Josh Allen, only behind Dak Prescott, who has 28. Did you think Brock Purdy was going to be tied with Josh Allen in touchdowns coming into the season?
No. I mean, all in, obviously, you've got rushing touchdowns, which are going to go up. I got to be honest. I mean, no, there's no way that I would have thought that Purdy would be tied there. I also didn't think that there would be no quarterback throwing for 40 touchdowns this season. Like, the numbers are just not where they normally are. It's kind of interesting. Actually, passing defense just in general has gotten better, unless you're the Eagles, because your passing defense is atrocious. But pretty much everybody else has gotten better across the league. There's not a lot of big numbers passing this year.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's been the case for a long time now that this is a passing league, and defenses are finally adjusting. Right, they're getting faster at linebacker. The safeties are becoming basically just corners at this point. So the league is adjusting. So we'll see what the next trend is. But yeah, interceptions, man. Brock Purdy is tied for ninth. So with 7, he's down one spot. There's a lot of guys that have 6, and so he's tied at 7 in 9th place. So if he has another good game where he doesn't throw an interception, there's a good chance he'll jump back up in that
Yeah,
regard.
for sure.
Sack tied 18th with 26 up. So he's improved on getting sacks. He dropped a few spots. So now he's only in 18th and getting sacks. It's remarkable how unoften Brock Purdy gets sacked, considering the line and the amount of pressure he's under. Man, Sam Howell has been sacked 58 times, 10 times more than the second guy, which is Bryce Young. That line is obviously horrific, and I'm looking forward to December 31st. They're going to get some. Our pass rushers are
I was
going to
gonna
be
say
stacking some numbers there.
it's not a good line, but also young quarterbacks, and that's actually probably the most impressive thing about what you're talking about with Brock Purdy is that young quarterbacks tend to walk themselves into sacks a lot. I know
Yes.
people last year were like, "Oh, poor Justin Fields, his line." It's like, well, he's accounting for like a fourth of those sacks because he just won't get rid of the ball, or he'll try to make something happen and he'll run backwards. It's not always on the line. Doesn't mean that the line is good by any means in Washington, but I bet you if we were to watch those 50 sacks or however many he has, that a lot of those would be on him holding the ball or trying to make a
Yeah.
play. Brock is like the exact opposite of that, to where he actually helps his offensive line because he is being decisive with the ball and he's not holding onto it too long. Very rarely does Brock walk himself into a bad sack.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a combination of both. But what I do know is on New Year's Eve, the Niners play the Commanders, and they're going to have a field day. They're going to be some padding
Yeah.
of stats against the Commanders, bro.
How many sacks? I mean, Chase Young's going to go crazy in that game, I would think, right?
Yes, yeah, right. Revenge game for Chase Young. He's gonna get a sack on his boys. But anyways, let's finish this up. This part is QBR and rating first. As usual, Brock Purdy's been at that spot for a long time. He's first in QBR, first in rating. He's trending 4,646 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions in a 17-game season. But these are numbers I wanted to show to you to just kind of give people a perspective on where Brock Purdy's at. QB records for the 49ers. Completion percentage. Steve Young leads from 1994 with 70.3. Joe Montana in 1989 was 70.2, which is where Brock Purdy is at right now. So he's 70.2.1 behind the all-time record of Steve Young, tied with Joe Montana in 1989. Just to give people a perspective of what this guy is doing this year, it's mind-boggling. Then we look at yards per game. Jeff Garcia has a record 2,000. And I looked at yards per game instead of yards because these guys, who knows how many games they played. They also have 16, injured 16-game seasons. But Brock Purdy, man, is trending 273 yards per game, where Jeff Garcia was 267. So he's 6 yards more per game than Jeff Garcia, which is the all-time 49ers record. And then touchdowns per game. This is where Brock Purdy has a ways to go. Steve Young in 94 was trending he only played 15 games, had 2.4 touchdowns per game. That's the all-time record. He finished with 36 in only 15 games. In 1998, 2.18. He finished with 35 in 16 games. Brock Purdy in 17 games is trending 33, which is 1.94. So he's a little bit behind in that regard, but still impressive to compare yourself with those people.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine he's probably pretty low as far as overall interceptions too. We're on pace for overall interceptions, might be number one there. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I hate to even say it like this because it seems like I'm going to slide him, and that's not what I'm trying to do. Really, I'm sliding everybody before Purdy because what Purdy's done has been phenomenal, right? I want to make sure that I'm clear about that, and I'm not taking anything away from that. The fact that some of these numbers have been around for as long as they have for the 49ers, as great as Montana was, as great as Steve Young was, it just shows how bad the quarterback play has been here. The rules are geared towards passing way more than they've ever been. If you put Steve Young or Joe Montana in today's game, they would go absolutely freaking crazy. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And especially you add Steve Young with his mobility. My gosh, you can't touch the quarterback. It would be stupid.
Yeah.
So the fact that these numbers are still standing today is awesome for those guys, shows how great they were, but also a little embarrassing because the league has turned into such a passing league, and no quarterback has been able to topple these numbers.
Yeah.
And here is Brock Purdy, who's having a very good season. But, when you compare it to some of the past seasons of elite numbers and elite passing numbers, we just talked about it. The league is down as far as touchdowns and yards and all those things. Yet here he is smashing all the 49ers records because nobody in front of him was worth a damn to take advantage of a passing league. So he's
Yeah.
having a great season right now. I mean, it's Tyreek Hill got injured yesterday and was in and out of that game. Didn't play a ton. He made his mark a little bit on that game, but overall, chances are he's now out of the MVP race. Really, it seems like it's coming down to Purdy and Dak. Now, I do worry that Dak playing for Dallas is going to get the nod because it's the Cowboys and whatever else, but Purdy's right there. I mean, it's Purdy, Dak. In my opinion, it's CMC, but I think the league is going to go with a quarterback, especially now that Tyreek Hill's likely not going to break that 2,000 yards. And it's going to be between Purdy and Dak unless something crazy happens here down the stretch.
It's probably
Why
gonna go
not
Dak.
Purdy? Why
Yeah,
not
if
Purdy?
if it ended today, I think it goes Dak because Dak has more touchdowns, less interceptions, and he plays for the Cowboys. For those
Yeah.
3 reasons, to me, it goes Dak if it ended today. But we'll see. I mean, they got 4 games left. Dak can throw multiple interceptions. Brock can just go off. Who knows what's going to
Well,
happen?
I want to know how they look at the numbers as well, because we look at it, and I know a lot of people point out like, well, okay, of course Dak has more yards because he's thrown way more times. He's thrown 90 more times, which is true. But then on the flip side, the fact that he's thrown that many more times and has just as high as a completion percentage and less interceptions is also very impressive, right? So that can go both ways, and I'm curious to see how the voters look at that, or if they even take that into account, if they just look at raw numbers. I really have no
Mhm.
idea what they take into account. But what I would say is that Brock is every bit as deserving as Dak Prescott is. He
Yeah, I
is.
mean, there's so many different ways. You can argue it either way. I would think, like, right, Dallas had a weaker schedule. Put up those numbers against weaker opponents. I would say in general. I think.
Yeah, but
Um,
they're playing against the defense, and if you look at the rankings of the defense, it's like Brock on average is playing the 18th ranked defense, and
mm,
Dak is playing the 19th ranked defense on average, or vice versa. I can't remember. So we look at teams and say, "Oh, the record, the record, the record."
yeah, but
But
it's
when
the
you look
defense.
at the defenses they're facing, which is what the quarterback plays, they don't play the other team's offense. They're ranked 18th and 19th on average, which is, I mean,
Mhm.
they're dead even there. So
Yeah, and you can also look at like who do you think has the better weapons, Dak or Brock? I think a lot of people would say Brock does, so they might deduct points for that in their head or whatever,
yeah.
or however they
But Dak
vote.
has a better offensive line, right? So, like, there's
True.
the
Yeah.
so and it's not like he's dealing with nothing over there. I would say, Cook is pretty good
Right.
and
They're pretty
and
decent. Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb's pretty good. Their tight end, their young tight end's good. So, he's not void of weapons in Dallas by any means, and he's got a
Yeah.
very good offensive line. I don't know. I think it's gonna be close. I think these last 4 games are gonna be interesting. If they end up with the same record, what does that look like? I think if Dallas loses one more and the 49ers can go undefeated, I think that would help down the stretch, right? The number 1 seed.
Sure.
So I think there's still some time, but if I had to give my vote right now, man, and I have to choose a quarterback, I'd probably go Purdy. I would. And maybe that's, homerism, but I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, what's not to like about Purdy? Everything he's doing, and I think that to take it back to what you were talking about just a minute ago in regards to different time. If you're a young 49ers fan watching this show right now, and I just read off these numbers, like you really need to understand that quarterbacks, pass rushers could take 2 steps, pick you up, and power drive you to the ground when Steve Young and Joe Montana were playing, right? They could dive and hit you below the knees. There's a lot of rule changes, even from the receiver standpoint, and what corners are able to do now. It was a different era. So, it's not discrediting Brock Purdy. I mean, this is phenomenal to be on the list with these guys to do what quarterbacks haven't been able to do over the last 20 plus years. Is phenomenal, but also, it's not to deteriorate the greatness of Steve Young and Joe Montana. You have to consider what game they were playing in back then.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk records, Tyreek Hill, 2,000 yards. He was on pace, and that was such a big deal, and they have 17 games now. If Jerry Rice played today, he would have had a 2,500 yard season already. So
Yeah,
these records are fantastic, but when you add in games and you add in rule changes, it's just a completely different game. It is. It's much easier to pass. It's much easier to accumulate yards as a wide receiver in today's league with the rules. You just really, it's hard to compare eras. It really is. So,
It's like
anyways,
trying to compare 3-point records in the NBA now compared to the 80s or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, we just got a 3-point line. Great. That's,
Yeah.
of course, they're not shooting it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Brother Bob says, both my guys up in here, I'm working, but I can hear. And he
Get to
says,
work,
before
Bob.
I go to work, let me say Dak is whack and I want a Super Bowl, though. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. The MVP thing is great, but I think that Purdy, CMC, they would much rather get a Super Bowl ring. I don't think that there's any question there. So
Mhm.
that's what they would lean towards as well. But if we can get both, that'd be great. DP
Yeah.
says, guys, my birthday was Saturday. Well, happy belated. And I got my wish to beat Seattle. Man, you should have dreamed bigger than that. You knew that was going to happen. My wife is a diehard. She's a Pigeon fan. Great weekend. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
DP. Man,
Happy birthday, man.
happy belated. But I'm telling you, you should have wished for like a Super Bowl, man. Like we were gonna beat Seattle.
Yeah, it's
That
coming
was gonna
anyway.
happen. But I'm happy they did it for you,
Yeah.
man. I will say this: Seattle beating Seattle is special. My oldest son, never forget it, was born in 2012 on a Thursday. And my first night in the hospital while my wife slept, deservedly so, I held my son and watched the 49ers beat the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. So
That's a
there
good
you go.
memory.
It
Yeah.
is. And I'll never forget it because they beat Seattle on that day. And he was wearing his little 49ers beanie and it was good to go, man. It was good to go. So
Good
Brother
memory.
Bob says La Taylor said that he couldn't play in this soft league. Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, I'm sure he couldn't. Lawrence
Yeah.
Taylor was it's funny because Coach and I have had this conversation a lot recently. You know how the NFL has changed and how what players could make it now versus then and then versus now, and that's a really hard thing to look at. But there's no denying that the rule changes have been significant, and it is a completely different game. I mean, even if you go watch the 49ers Super Bowl run in 2012 and watch that game, and rule changes had already started. But even from then to now, it's so different what you can get away with, what you can't get away with. Tom Brady talked about, when I first started playing, I couldn't just throw balls to wide open receivers. I had to also make sure that they weren't going to get killed on the back end of this. And now you don't have to worry about that. Just throw it to them. If they're open, just throw it to them.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about making a business decision because the defense already has to do that unless they want to get kicked out of a game. So for
That's a good
me,
point.
it was much different back then. Now, I mean, there's no wonder at 40 something years old, he's putting up 5,000 yards with ease because the league is so much easier to pass in than it was when he was younger. He's like, this is like playing Madden on rookie. And I was playing it on all Madden all these years. This is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. He makes a good point. I agree with him. I mean, I don't like the whole old head talking down about the modern day game. I don't like that in general, but he's not wrong. Yeah.
No, and but he also played today, right?
Played
It's not
both
like
eras.
he just
Yeah.
retired last year. It's not
Yeah.
like he's removed 15 years. Tom Brady, I'm speaking now, obviously Lawrence Taylor, but
Yeah.
I mean, who's gonna stop Lawrence Taylor from talking? But
Yeah.
Tom Brady just retired last year, so he really did get to see the evolution from
Both
what the
eras.
game was like in 2000 all the way through now. If
Mhm.
anybody knows, he knows that the game is certainly different now. And if he thinks it's easier, then he thinks it's easier. And that's
Yeah.
why I think when you're looking at players, quarterbacks, wide receivers, it's great to take into account history, but it's also what are you doing against your peers? And that's why when I talk greatest receivers of all time, I have Antonio Brown like right there, top 7, because when you compare him to his peers in his time, dude, he was playing against Julio Jones and AJ Green and Larry Fitzgerald, yet he was getting first team all pros every year, not those guys. So,
Yeah.
those are things that you have to look at. How do you compare to your peers and just kind of go from there? That's the start of the conversation, anyways. But enough of that. Here we go. Let's talk about some unsung heroes. And it's been so long that I forgot to play the intro. I'm just not going to do it. Either way, we haven't done this one in a while, but unsung heroes from this last weekend. I think that there's a lot of routes that you can go with. I'll be generous and I'll let you go first on this one. And I think we might have the same one, but I'll go somewhere different if you go with who I think you're going to go with. Who's your unsung hero from this last weekend?
Honestly, man, there's guys on both sides of the ball. There's a lot of guys I feel like this
5
week.
people you could say, yeah.
Shoot, there's another one on all three sides of the ball. Damn. Can we have more than one?
Let's go. Let's each go two, but we'll
All
go back
right.
and forth because we might overlap. So
All right. Well, the first one I'm going to give is Javon Kinlaw, man. Javon Kinlaw
that's the one that I thought we were both gonna be like, okay, Javon, yeah,
got to, man. I mean, he could barely see the field throughout his career, and now he's not only healthy and played every game, he's contributing. He's not a negative in any way. Like we were watching before, and he would get pushed around. He couldn't get low, couldn't get leverage, and I think it's obviously a healthy related thing. It's hard to get low when you're dealing with knee issues. But
yeah,
man, he's been healthy all year, and he's had a ton of positive plays. Last game, I believe he had 2 sacks in that game. The prior, he's just balling out, man. He's showing up all over the field, stopping the run. Did a great job of filling in for Eric Armstead. You got to be happy for that guy because this is his last chance to go out there and earn another contract with another team or this team. And I feel like he's done enough to where he'll at least get another chance to keep playing football next year. So, I mean, he's just stepping up in a major way. He's contributed him positively, and I'm super happy for him. I'm going to go Javon Kinlaw on this one.
yeah, most certainly. Javon Kinlaw, I think, has to be at the top of the list, and really because I think when I'm looking at these guys, especially at this stage of the season, it's guys that are kind of on their last leg, guys that were written off. And it's hard not to root for players like that on a personal level. You got Javon Kinlaw. We all know his story. Homeless, living in his car, great college player, came in, was supposed to fill in for one of the favorites as far as DeForest Buckner. Everybody loved Defoe. Everybody loved Defoe.
Mm-hmm.
He gets traded, everybody's upset, and then Kinlaw comes in and is a quote unquote bust, but really not because he is not good. It's because he can't stay healthy. And so year after year, he misses training camps, and the time to actually improve is during practice and training camp, and he's not getting that time. The only time he's getting is on the field, and that's been sporadic because of these knee injuries. And you talk about getting low, and he's unable to do so. And now to watch him this year flourish in a role that, it's not as big as the role that was expected for him, but he's saving his career right now in this final year. They didn't pick up his fifth-year option. I mean, that shows you what the 49ers thought of the situation. And he's doing everything that he can do to earn a second contract and earn being able to play in this league long term. And you've got to be happy for Javon Kinlaw. And I think another player that kind of suits that, not as big of a comeback story, I would say, because the expectations weren't necessarily there. But Ryan, you were there at training camp with me a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
Every time that this man stepped on the field, we
I know
knew
who
that they were going to attack him.
Yeah.
And we knew they were going to complete passes. It was like, oh, there's Ambry Thomas. Here comes a 10-yard slant or, a quick slant. It's going to be a gain at least 10 yards, and they're going to have 3 yards of separation. It almost got comical there towards the end because you just knew exactly what was going to happen. And yet, because of some of the circumstances, I do think it's possible that he may not have made this team if Womack and Luter and these guys had been healthy. I think there is a possibility he could have been cut.
Mm-hmm.
But because they were injured to start the season, it left room on this roster. He stayed afloat. He didn't start the season, but when his name was called on, he's performed very, very well. And I thought when they played him a few weeks ago that, okay, it makes sense. The team they were playing at that time had a strong slot receiver in the Jaguars and Christian Kirk. So, okay, you want to move Diamador Lenore inside and you want Ambry Thomas to play outside because you don't want that matchup to be Oliver. So depending on the receivers, maybe next week they go to Oliver and they move Demo back outside because you're going up against a DK and an AJ Brown and some of these other guys. And quite frankly, they haven't made the change. They've just kept him on the outside, and he's done a phenomenal job. It hasn't been perfect. He gave up a touchdown last week, but that throw coming from Drew Lock might have been a bit lucky, but it was about as well placed as it could be for that touchdown. But Ambry Thomas, I am so happy for him as well. He has saved his career potentially, at least with the 49ers, the way that he's played. And you've got to be very happy for him. So I'm going to use him as an unsung hero as well.
That's a good one, man. I didn't even think about him. Let me go to the guy. Do you know this? I'm gonna get a trivia question for you, Jess.
Mm-hmm.
Who earned the highest PFF grade in the game against Seattle?
Jair Brown.
I'm pretty sure it was Feliciano.
It might have been. I was just
Yeah.
guessing, but I said it with
That was
confidence,
your
and you thought
guess.
I knew the
Oh,
answer.
I
I
thought you
didn't know
knew
the
the
answer.
answer. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. No. So Jair, I was like, wait a minute. Jair Brown though was one of my options there, brother. I was gonna go Jair Brown, but then I started thinking about Feliciano and the job he's done at Rice. He had the highest PFF score. I'm pretty sure. I'm second guessing myself
You're
now.
probably right. You're
But yeah,
probably right. I think
yeah.
Jair Brown. I think I heard that he had the highest PFF score on the defense,
Mm.
so that was why I went that route. But I have no clue.
You threw me off. You threw me off. But yeah, no, I think John Feliciano, man, did in fact have high PFF and take PFF for what it's worth. But John Feliciano, man, like I'm wrong about a lot of things. One thing I really thought from the beginning was that John Feliciano is one of the best linemen on this team, top of the top 3, or if not top 3, definitely top 4. He's better than Burford. He's better than McKivitz. He might be better than Jake Brendel. So John Feliciano, I'm a little surprised it took this long for him to get on the field. Now Burford is injured and he's supposed to be available for this next game. I'm curious to see what the 49ers do. Are they going to pop Burford back in over Feliciano? It would be dumb to me, but he's doing a fantastic job blocking, earned the highest PFF score, I'm pretty sure, last week. So he's an unsung hero to me.
Now, what we know is that Burford getting injured last time opened the door for Feliciano. So Feliciano got like 2 straight weeks because he filled in for Banks. Then Banks came back, but Burford was out. So he filled in for Burford, did a phenomenal job, I think, in both of those. Then there was talk that they were going to split the snaps, much like they did last year with Burford, and they were going to do that with him and Feliciano. And that was the plan. But Burford, they thought, was playing so well against the Eagles that they never took him out. Then he gets hurt again, opens the door for Feliciano. I've got to imagine that Feliciano has played his way into at least splitting those snaps. I don't like the whole splitting snaps thing. Just play who's better. I think it's clear that Feliciano's better. And I think Burford's improving. I think going forward, I'm actually pretty confident that Burford's going to be better even next year and be okay. But I think right now Feliciano is the better player, and I would play Feliciano. So I love that one.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to rotate these guys, even though I don't think they should. But
Yeah.
maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay for these next 4 games. But come playoff time, like, quit messing around. Play the best
Play who's
guy.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's Burford. Maybe by then it is Burford. I don't think the discrepancy is a wide margin by any means, but I do think that there's a clear margin, a clear difference, and Feliciano's at this stage is better than Burford.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I will go with the person that I thought had the highest PFF grade, or at least my guess on that, which was Jair Brown. I think Jair Brown, we talk about pressure. You come in for a former All-Pro, first team All-Pro last year in Hufanga. Hufanga goes down. Jair Brown really hadn't played a lot this year. He was the highest draft pick for the 49ers. Comes in, plays very well. Then they add some pressure and bringing in Logan Ryan. And I understand, maybe Logan Ryan was meant just for depth, and that's okay. But I also do think when you bring in a 32-year-old who says that he doesn't need the money, who says he's leaving his family on the East Coast and has never played for a West Coast team, and says things like, I was on a cruise enjoying my retirement and the perfect situation came knocking, that tells me that the 49ers might have put in his ear that, hey, there's going to be some playing time for you. Now, maybe that could mean as far as a nickel. Maybe they go back to some of the 3 safety things they did last year with Jimmy Ward. Maybe that meant, hey, we like Jair Brown, but maybe he's a rookie and we could use you. And so we're going to flip you guys in and out, or maybe you have a chance to take his job. I don't know. But either way, it was pressure when you sign a guy like that because he is a good player. He has won rings and he's not super over the hill. Jair Brown's playing really, really good football. And I think the question mark early for me was, man, there's some redundancy, or at least it felt like there was some redundancy with him, Hufanga, and Gibson. And now what you're seeing is exactly what you saw in college. Is even though the 40 time is not there, the range is there, the instincts are there, and you're starting to see that to where okay, Gibson retires this offseason, which is likely. He came back one more year because he really wanted to play with Hufanga in this defense, and he thought the team had a really good chance to win a Super Bowl. He's likely gone, but the future looks bright with Hufanga and Jair Brown. And I think that tandem right there can do a lot of really good things together. And I actually do think that there's not a lot of redundancy now and that they can play together. And so, Jair Brown, shout out to you. You're playing phenomenal, and I love to see it.
Yeah, man, it's kind of crazy to think Jason Verrett and Logan Ryan are on this team, and who knows if they're even going to see the field.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of crazy, man.
Well, that's
Real
the other
quick,
thing is when you sign a 32-year-old, you're not really at it on the surface. You're not asking him to play special teams, and that's why I was like, okay, this seems a little weird. Why is he here? Is it really just for depth? Is he gonna play? I don't know.
real quick, can we give an honorable mention to our boy Mitch Wishnowsky as an unsung hero?
Mitch Wishnowsky, honorable mention for team MVP. I'm not even kidding. It sounds like a joke, but when you watch him and his command of the football, I don't think I've ever talked punter as much as I have this year. And it was obvious week one when I saw him in person. It was like, dude, this guy's incredible. And then when I went and watched them play the Bucks in Santa Clara, I watched him most of the warm-ups. All the players are warming up and everybody's excited about CMC and Purdy and Debo and all. And I'm glued on Mitch Wishnowsky. It's like the command he has is absolutely incredible. He's a really good player.
He hit 20 miles per hour, man. So I mean, obviously his punts are pretty damn impressive, man. Like, but like the thing that impressed me is I watched him take off. I'm like, holy damn, that dude's fast. And then we found out the numbers. He hit over 20 miles per hour, which is pretty much reserved for corners, DBs, and wide receivers in this league. Maybe a couple quarterbacks, but man, 20 miles an hour. Yeah. So shout out to Mitch Wishnowsky, man.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. And I remember when they drafted him, a lot of the talk was, oh, he can run these fakes. And we really haven't seen it. We really haven't seen it. So I don't know.
Hopefully we'll see it in the future.
Brother Bob says JN talks smack, but is nice on behind enemy lines. Yeah, I usually am gonna feed off the energy of the other content creator with behind enemy lines. You got to remember, I'm actively reaching out to these people, asking for an hour of their time. They don't have to do it by any means. And the last thing I'm gonna do is just be a jerk towards them or talk trash. That's up to you guys. You guys can do that, but I've got to give a safe platform for them because they're giving up their time. And
you want them to come back.
It's just respectful. It's respectful. It's a respect thing. Yes, they root for a team that the 49ers are going against. Yes, they may root for a team that we hate, but they are human beings and they are being gracious with their time. So I'm always going to be
and you want them to
err on the side of respect. I'm just going to.
Yeah. You want them to come back, Bob. Like I feel like if you had a show or two,
no,
I don't think
the word would get around quick and nobody would be doing behind enemy lines when Bob was running the show. I can guarantee that. Gator 49er says still can't get over Sirianni's pink eye face. During the Dallas game, we took that man's soul. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Yeah, man, it's rough. Poor old Sirianni, man. Brother Bob says, you feed off my energy. Laugh out loud. So has X ever worn the gold cap? He has not yet. I've got to imagine he ordered it from Mitchell and Ness was the cap that I picked out. I give about a week to 10 day shipping. I think that's fair. But we better see it this week. Otherwise, he just didn't come through with the bet. And that would be disappointing. So, but I think he's a man of integrity. They're down bad, but I think he'll wear the hat. I think he'll wear the hat. So we'll see. All right. This is
Cowboy one too after that. Sorry, X.
Listen,
Sorry,
I had the Cowboy content creator wearing a 49er hat. Now I've got an Eagle content creator wearing the 49er hat. I had a superstition for many, many years that I did not bet on my teams because every time I did, they lost. But this year, I've had 2 bets on the 49ers, and both of them, they have come through. I feel like I'm over that hump. I can bet now on the 49ers. So, and this dates back to, I think it was 2012. The 49ers tied with the Rams and lost to the Rams that year, and the Rams were really bad. That was the year the 49ers went to the Super Bowl, if I'm remembering my history right. And I worked with a Rams fan, and he was the one that approached me about making bets. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to smoke the Rams. Are you kidding me? And then they ended up losing and tying. And I'm like, I'm not ever betting on my teams ever again. It's just not going to happen. That was terrible. I jinxed them. So
Yeah. I think my all-time attendance record, Niners are like 2-5 or something every time I go to a Niners game. And but that was all I candlestick. I've never been to
including
Levi's.
this year, they lost. So don't go to a playoff game. You're not allowed. That's just the way that it works. You can
Yeah.
go to the preseason games next year.
Yeah.
That's where you get to join.
Right.
All right, Ryan. This is the title of my show, and it is the best chance in 30 years. Best chance in 30 years. That's roughly how long it's been since this organization has won a Super Bowl. There have been some good teams that have been here. I think the teams that were the closest, we talk about the 98 49ers. Garrison Hurst doesn't go down. I still think they have a chance to possibly go to that Super Bowl. And if they get in, anything is possible. Very, very good players over there. We talk about the 2012 Super Bowl run and then those NFC championship runs under Harbaugh, very close. Felt like the 49ers 3 years running were the second best team in the league. They kept losing to the eventual Super Bowl champions. And then you fast forward to the 2019 team. We know how great they were, this close to winning a Super Bowl. And then you've had a couple NFC championship appearances. And maybe this is just me living in the moment, but thinking back to my confidence level of all those teams, I don't think that I've been as confident as I have this year that the 49ers can win a Super Bowl. Because in the last time that I felt like this, I was very young, and it was in the 94 season, and it was when they won that Super Bowl. Not only because the 49ers are so good. We've seen the 49ers, 2019 was a great example of this. 29.9 points a game, top tier offense and scoring, top tier defense and scoring. So we've seen this before very recently from the 49ers where they have a top tier offense and a top tier defense. But it's not just that the 49ers are as good as they are. It's also that I look across the landscape of the league, and when I remove the 49ers, I can't look at a team and honestly say that any of them are good, are good enough to win rings. Who would you pick? Let's remove the 49ers. I'm going to ask you, Ryan. Let's remove the 49ers. They're not in this league. Who would you pick to win the Super Bowl, and would you have any confidence in that?
No. Who would I pick? I'd pick either the Ravens or the Cowboys, believe it or not, but I wouldn't have any confidence in either one. No, there's I mean, the Ravens I still want to see, even though they struggled against the Rams, I still want to see them on Christmas versus us.
Yeah.
I think the Rams have improved throughout the year, and they're better than a lot of people give them credit for. So I'm not going to.
Matthew Stafford without Cooper Kupp hung with the 49ers for quite a while in that game. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's that big of a surprise that happened. So
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So I still think the Ravens are a really good team, and we're going to find out on Christmas just how good. But I think outside of that, I mean, we already smacked the hell out of the Cowboys. Although I will say, I feel like the Cowboys are playing better now too.
I agree.
So, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, there's no one if I had to bet, like gun to my head, Ryan, who's going to win the Super Bowl? I'm Niners. And I'm pretty confident about it.
You feel pretty good about that, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me ask you that. Let me ask it in a different way. In chat, I want to know your opinion on this, and just be real with it. If you had to bet your most prized possession, whatever that is, not like family, right? Like, let's not get crazy with it, or gun to your head or anything crazy like that, but your most prized possession, whether it's your house, your car, memorabilia, whatever that is, whatever you hold near and dear to your heart. Maybe it's your wedding ring, something like that. If I said you could choose the 49ers to win the Super Bowl or the field, you can't choose any other option. It's the field or the 49ers. What are you putting your most prized possession up for? I'm taking the 49ers. And that is not at all, at least I feel in my heart, that is not a homer take. I really don't believe. I just think that they are clearly the best team right now. Clearly the best team. So 2 things, chat. What are you putting up? What is your prized possession? And are you taking the field or are you taking the 49ers?
I might take the field if you put it that way, if I'm being real, Jess. If you put Niners versus any specific team, I'm probably picking Niners.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you do field, that opens up the door for what? 9 other teams? at least possibility going through.
What if the 49ers get the number 1 seed? Does that change your mind?
Man, I here's what I know. I can tell you this much. If the Niners get the 1 seed, they are absolutely going to the Super Bowl. If the Niners get the 1 seed and they're healthy, zero question that they will end up in the Super Bowl. That much I can guarantee you. So I would be willing to bet a lot for that. I'd give you great odds on that one. If they can get that bye week, get the home field advantage, be healthy, there's no team in the NFL that's going to come to Levi's and knock the 49ers out of the playoffs. Not going to happen. So that much I do know. We'll see what happens in the Super Bowl and who the opponent is. The thing about Lamar Jackson, man, that scares me, and Patrick Mahomes. Honestly, those two guys scare me. I know my stock has went down a little bit from Patrick Mahomes because I didn't like how the way he's reacted. They lost 4 out of the last 6 games. But Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, either one of those guys could just show up and be Superman for one game. So seeing those guys in the Super Bowl is a little scary because Lamar Jackson can completely take over a game. Patrick Mahomes can completely take over a game. And all they need to do is get there. So those two guys scare me. Outside of that, though, if I'm betting money, I'm betting on the Niners.
Yeah. I feel like this isn't right, Samir. I feel like CMC and Trent Williams were both first rounders.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they got
Right?
first round. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They got first
I could
round.
be wrong about that.
BA's first rounder.
BA's a first rounder too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm reading it wrong. I feel
Maybe
like I'm
so.
reading that wrong potentially. I don't know. But
Neither draft nor trade.
I guess I don't know. I look across the landscape of the league and I don't see a good league right now. I just don't. And I see the 49ers, they are very good. This team could compete in many, many years for a Super Bowl, but there's a difference in compete and thinking that they are head and shoulders the best team in the league.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah, I mean, they have the. So let's talk about this 2012 team, though.
Yeah.
We're talking about best chance in 30 years.
Yeah.
You're more confident in this team now than you were, coincidentally, when the 49ers went. If this 49ers team plays this year's Ravens, you're more confident in the win than you were when the 49ers played the Ravens in the Super Bowl in 2012.
I think I would probably be pretty even if that's the matchup, just because I remember the Ravens were old and they were banged up.
Mm-hmm.
Ray Lewis had, I think it was a torn bicep or pec.
Something, yeah.
And he just continued to play as if he didn't have that, which, I mean, that ends seasons for everybody. I don't know how he played with that.
You're right.
But he was hurt. Suggs was hurt. Reed was old. It was an aging team. It was an aging team. And I felt like the 49ers were the young version of that Ravens squad. And the way Kaepernick had played throughout those playoffs, I mean, Kaepernick, if I remember correctly, had in 3 games had over 1,000 total yards
in the playoffs.
Yeah. 7 touchdowns and 2 turnovers. 7 total touchdowns, 2 turnovers, and over 1,000 total yards. Talk about a playoff performance or a playoff run. That is asinine. Kaepernick was on his ish that year.
Best player in the league, honestly, that year.
At that time, yeah. I mean,
the most explosive, dynamic.
He was most explosive for sure. And he was playing really, really good during that run. So going into that game, I was very, very confident. And especially because they had that comeback against the Falcons, which made me even more confident. And it had to be done. A lot of it had to be done through the air from Kaepernick, not necessarily his legs, because they kind of bottled him up. So yeah, I mean, I think going into that game, I was very confident. But if you had asked me 4 weeks before the end of the season, I couldn't say that I would have been that confident. They were just making the quarterback change to Kaepernick, although he had played very good in his first game or so. You just didn't know. I mean, you're asking a young quarterback to take over a team that just came off of an NFC championship. What is that going to look like long term? I wouldn't have been that confident 4 weeks prior to the end of the season as I am now.
I think you make fair points there. Yeah, I was confident in the playoffs going into the Super Bowl, like you said, in these 49ers, just because of the way they performed in the
Once that
playoffs.
Packers game happened, it was
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm
yeah, we
so
got
confident
this.
now, right?
Yeah, I was shocked that we lost that Super Bowl. That was the most heartbreaking Super Bowl loss. That was more heartbreaking to me than the Chiefs one was, because that was the first one we've ever lost. I'm showing my kids like, hey kids, all we do is win Super Bowls, and they're little kids and they're watching, and no. I guess we do I guess we lose Super Bowls on occasion as well. So yeah, that was heartbreaking. But yeah, I think you're right on your take there.
Yeah, I just I have the utmost confidence in this team right now, and when you really look at the season and how it's gone, starting 5-0, they had the 3-game skid, and then they've ran off this what 4, 5 since
Mm,
bye week 4, whatever it is, 5, I don't
yeah.
remember. Either way,
But
I
what about
mean,
this though? Think about it this way though, Jess. I just popped in my head, and I
mhm.
apologize for interrupting, but
Yeah, go ahead.
that 2012 team, did they have a weakness? Like, this Niners team has a weak
Yeah,
right
I
side.
think they did. I think they
What
did.
was their weakness?
I think their secondary and coverage was a bit of a weakness. They could hit. They could hit. Now they were laying people out with
Was
that
it
that
Carlos
safety
Rogers and
tandem,
Chris Culver, right?
but they weren't the best cover guys. They weren't. I mean, they could be got. So I would
Yeah,
say that that secondary, as far as coverage goes, was probably the weakness, I guess.
yeah. I like Carlos Rogers. Chris Culver was
I thought they
briefly
were
good.
good. I thought they were
Yeah.
fine. It's not like they were awful by any means. I mean, I would say that I look at them like I do this offensive line where it's like, okay, we know that we have a couple good offensive linemen, right? And then there's, Brendell's fine. I mean, he's more than serviceable. He's a starting level center for sure, but he's not top 10, top 5. And McKivitz's been up and down, but I think he's probably I don't think he's great, but I think he's probably a little bit better than like worst case scenario, which was, oh God, this guy shouldn't even be playing in this league.
Mhm.
I mean, there was a lot of talk of that craziness. So,
Yeah.
he's been fine. I mean, I think he's low level starting. So I don't know.
Who's weaker, the 2012 corners or the right side of the 2023 Niners?
Probably go slightly offensive line, right side. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that.
Yeah.
I'd say that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change anything that you've said or I've said.
Right.
It just popped in my head thinking about that, like, what was really their weakness. I mean, I know that, yeah, I think you're right by pointing out that's their biggest weakness, but
Hmm.
I don't think they were a weak link as much as I think Colton McKivitz and Burford could be.
Yeah, I think that secondary was protected a lot because of how great the linebackers were, how hard hitting the safeties were. And again, just 10, 12 short years ago, you could hit the way that
Yes.
those safeties could. And
And then
teams made
D-line.
business decisions because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you add in that pass rush, which was also phenomenal. And I think the offensive line, the right side of the offensive line is protected a lot here, though, too. When you really think about it,
Some
you look
play
at all the
calling
skill position players, you look at the play calling,
and
you look at the
Purdy.
left side of the offensive line, you look
Yeah.
at Purdy. They've
Yeah.
done a good job protecting their biggest weakness. So no team is perfect ever.
Right.
You
Right.
look at it across the history of the NFL, there's never been a perfect roster. But man, this one's pretty damn good. This one is
Yeah, man.
pretty damn good. So.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about these injuries here. And in my personal life, anyways, I'm very glass half full. And when
Mhm.
things don't happen or don't go my way, I always try to sit and reflect. And instead of sulking over it, I try to figure out the reason why. I really, truly think that there is a reason for everything that happens. And
Mhm.
sometimes you don't know that reason for a while. Sometimes you go for a promotion and maybe you're passed up and you're pissed off and you don't realize that there's other doors or other opportunities that are going to open that you didn't have the foresight for. And thank goodness you didn't get that promotion because this other thing is better for you long term. And if you just wait it out, things are going to kind of turn your way.
Mhm.
That's kind of what I'm looking at when it comes to these injuries. I think that they're low key a blessing in disguise because, and we'll talk about our biggest surprise in a moment. So I'm not going to reveal that, I guess, but I'll tie the two together here in a few. But I think when I look at the 49ers and some of these younger players, we talked about unsung heroes. there had to be a lot of unsung heroes on defense this last week because of those injuries. You're forcing some of these players that aren't getting playing time necessarily or as much playing time to play big time roles for a team that is trying to win a Super Bowl. I think ultimately it is a blessing in disguise to get some of these guys some play because we talked about it last week, Ryan. Looking at the injury history of the 49ers and what can derail this team, we agreed it's injuries. That is the one thing. Well, now I'm not so sure. Certainly losing Trent Williams or CMC, maybe. But some of these other guys losing those players, we have my dogs are going crazy. We have players that have stepped up and are playing well in their absence. Do you think that these injuries are a blessing in disguise, or do you think that I'm just kind of being a bit of a homer with it?
Well, I think you can see the bright side in everything. I mean, I think ultimately it'd be more of a blessing if they never got hurt and stayed
Yeah.
healthy all year, right? But I think you can see the bright side in it. What I think another part of the bright side in it is the injuries to Armstead, Hargrave, Ward. If you look at the timing of them, they're going to be
Mm,
fully recovered right in time for the
yes.
playoffs. So it's like, okay, they're not injured bad. They can sit back for, 2, 3, 4 games, let the other guys like you're talking about get some playing time, and they're going to be perfectly healthy when it's most important, which is entering the playoffs. So that's another way to look at it. Yeah, I think it's about looking on the bright side of things, and those are some of the bright points, some of the positives of that. Obviously, I think it'd be better if no one ever got injured. But overall, I think this year the 49ers, man, have been pretty damn healthy, man. Knock on wood. Like, I don't really believe in superstition, to be
Yeah.
honest, or when I say things, oh, because I said this, something bad's gonna happen. I don't believe in it, but I'll knock on wood for you guys out there watching that do. But overall, man, Niners have been super healthy this league, and that's a big part of why they've been so successful.
Yeah, and I mean, we can go quickly injury by injury. They lose Talanoa Hufanga, but Jair Brown has stepped in, played very well. And I think the blessing there is that now we know that he and Hufanga can play together because Jair Brown is a little bit of a different safety. And maybe frankly, a better pairing with Gibson than Hufanga, because I do think there is some redundancy with Hufanga and Gibson a little bit. And
Mhm.
I think that Jair Brown being a little bit more rangy helps them fit their roles a little bit better. So I think that's the blessing there. When you look at Armstead going down, Kinlaw is healthy for the first time in his career. He's playing very good football. I think him getting more playing time and allowing his career to be on display and back on track, I think that's a blessing. When you look at Burford going down, Feliciano stepping in and quite frankly might be better than Burford, or we think he is. I think that's a blessing. So just looking across some of these injuries, now we'll see. I think Charvarius Ward, him going down for a game. I don't know if I want to see multiple games without Charvarius Ward, but I think in that game, thrusting Ambry Thomas into a bigger role and Lenore and even somebody who probably wasn't playing with a lot of confidence playing nickel corner early in the year for the 49ers. I'm trying to blink on his name.
You talking about
The
Womack?
no, not Womack. Who started at nickel corner?
Oliver?
Oliver.
Mhm,
Oliver having to play a little bit and maybe getting his confidence back. So I just
mhm.
look at it and I say, hey, there is a blessing in disguise. Now again, you don't want those injuries to happen in the playoffs. You certainly want your starters. But if somebody goes down and has to miss a half of a game or maybe isn't able to play in a game and it's around those positions, we have a little bit more confidence than what we would have if it just happened out of nowhere in the playoffs. Now we kind of have some of those answers that they'll be okay. They have other options. They'll be okay. And I think those are all good things.
Yeah, it's always good to get those younger guys work, especially the defensive line rotation. I think guys like Kinlaw, Randy Gregory, who else? I mean, there's a lot of these these defenders that we got to back up our main guys have been getting play this last week because Hargrave was out, Kinlaw was out, or excuse me, Armstead was out. So it's been good for them as well. I think getting those guys more snaps, more involved in the rotation has been good. Oh, Clelin Ferrell, yeah, Clelin Ferrell,
Mhm.
Randy Gregory, Kinlaw, all benefited from getting more snaps in this last game, and sounds like they're probably gonna get a little bit more over the next couple of weeks. So that's another point, to your point.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tie it into this one, and I'll start with this one as well, only because I want to tie them together. And I know it's not going to be your biggest surprise,
Mm-hmm.
but biggest surprise this year for the San Francisco 49ers on the season, for me, it's got to be the depth of this team. For me, I had so many concerns about this team that centered around depth and injuries and all those other things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I mean, I can go position group by position group, and the three places I was the most worried. It
Mm-hmm.
was at the corner spot, secondary. They went with the youth movement. That youth movement has paid off, and they banked on somebody like Diamador Lenore taking a big step forward, and he has. So I think the depth issues, quote unquote issues that I thought might be there in the secondary are not. Even if those younger guys, Womack and Luter, are unable to do anything, well, now they've got Verrett. Maybe he can step in for a few games and play well. They've added Logan Ryan, who can play a little bit of nickel as well. So they've got a lot of depth there that wasn't necessarily there preseason, or a lot of questions around the depth. They've answered those questions. Then we go to defensive line. I mean, look at the additions that they've brought on since just before the trade deadline. You add in a Randy Gregory. You add in a Chase Young, Kinlaw staying healthy for the first time in his career. Gibbons is playing maybe the best that he's ever played. All of a sudden, they went from what I thought was a talented defensive line, but thin, to a very, very deep defensive line. And I think you can say the same thing about the offensive line. I know it's not the greatest, right? We have our complaints about the right side, but Feliciano being there, Morris come in and played pretty good in some moments at tackle. I think there's some depth along the offensive line, and that I think was a fear as well. It was like, man, it's already not that great on the right side. If they have an injury, how bad can this thing get? Well, it actually might get better with some of the injuries. So
Mm-hmm.
really, depth was my biggest concern this season, and it's a team that I said was going to be 12-5. I was wrong on that, even though I thought that was a pretty fair record. This looks like they're going to be 13-4 at worst, maybe only 3 losses. But ultimately, my biggest concern centered around depth. And the 49ers have, on the fly, with some of the additions that they've brought in, been able to retool and stay very, very deep. And that is a rare thing to do when you're paying guys as much as they're paying some of these guys.
Yes, I think that's a good point, man. I think for me, man, the biggest surprises, they're all centered around one guy, which is Brock Purdy. Like, first of all, let's start at the beginning. I didn't expect him to start week 1. I thought there's no way this guy's going to be ready in time to start week 1. We're talking about like a week 4 start for this guy, probably, if we're being fair. No, he starts and does great right away. So that's a huge surprise. The fact that he was able to even be there, started off the season, big surprise from Brock Purdy. Then his overall play in general, there was no sophomore slump for Brock Purdy. There was improvement for Brock Purdy. So he's playing better than he did last year off a UCL injury. Huge surprise for me. And really the biggest one for me, I mean, you guys know I called Brock Purdy. I said, he's dink and dunk, man. I was watching him, watched Jimmy Garoppolo 5-6 years, then watched Brock Purdy come out, and he had the lowest big throw rate of all rookie quarterbacks in a long time. I maybe the lowest ever. Brock Purdy, rookie quarterback, big time throw rate was one of the lowest of all time last year. He was like 2 for 6 which is 33%, with an interception over 30 yards last year. This year, he's like 17 for 22, 6 touchdowns. He's top 5 in big time throw rate. So, like, I mean, when I looked at the numbers and what he was doing last year, it made sense to me to think, hey, everything the scouts said about him with his arm strength being an issue was correct. And I anticipated him coming back off a UCL injury, struggling even more with those deep throws and his arm strength. Not the case. I'm just blown away and surprised that this guy has been as good as he has been deep. He's one of the best in the NFL, top 5 in big time throw rate from dead last year. I did not see it coming. And to me, it's the biggest difference in this team. The reason why I'm the most confident I have ever been in a team since maybe, if not 2012, at least, 1998, when we didn't win, is because we have a deep passing game now, and we haven't had that this entire time. Last time we had a deep passing game was Colin Kaepernick. So it's been the biggest surprise to me, one that I was thrilled to not see coming.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, I think regardless of what you thought about Purdy coming into the year, whether you thought they could win a ring with him, whether you thought he was going to be a really good player for a long term, whether you had questions, what it doesn't matter. I think it's fair to say that he's probably exceeded all expectations. I mean,
He's got to. Even if you're a big supporter, you have
yeah,
to be
you weren't
surprised
saying,
by it.
okay, he's going to be in the MVP conversation
Right.
and he's going to do this. And you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I think he's going to have a really good season. And I think he's, could be a top 10
Yeah.
Like that was some of the like far thinking was like, oh, I think he could be top 10 this year and whatever. It was like, okay. But
Yeah, right, well,
MVP, like, I
yeah.
don't know if anybody had that on there. If you had, if you had these three things on your bingo card, then you probably should yell bingo, which is Brock Purdy being an MVP, Browning coming in and showing that he might be the next Brock Purdy, and CJ Stroud up. I mean, he got a concussion this last week, but putting up almost 5,000 yards, being your only 5,000 yard passer this year. And now it doesn't look like he's going to get there because of the concussion he had this last week, and he didn't do much. But really, those three things, like if you thought any of those things, like check the bingo card off, you won. Like it's over. You are Nostradamus.
Or Dak Prescott.
Or Dak Prescott doing what he's doing again. A lot of people were worried about his turnovers, and here he goes. I mean, he was kind of the original Brock Purdy, not quite as incredible as far as being last pick in the draft, but third round pick, came in. You look at his first 2 years, very, very good numbers, took a good team to the playoffs and what have you. Then he kind of had some interesting years there, had the serious leg injury, and now he's in an MVP conversation. So yeah, man, there's a lot of wild things that have happened this season for sure.
Absolutely.
James says, great season, but I think of politics and bias. Dak will get the MVP nod over Purdy. He's been in the league longer. He's more popular and is closer to the traditional model of franchise quarterback. I hear what you're saying, and I do worry about that, especially him being a Dallas Cowboy. However, I think the league likes storylines, and I think the league likes money. And I think all those things that you talk about with Dak Prescott, you certainly could use Brock Purdy for as well and say, hey, Mr. Irrelevant, he's gone against what we thought the league was. He plays for
story.
Yeah, the story's phenomenal. When you're thinking storylines, the Super Bowl is a 2-week process. And for about 10 days of that 2-week process, it's all about the best storylines. You're telling me if you had to write a script for the best storylines in the NFL, that Brock Purdy being the league's MVP, Mr. Irrelevant, heading into a Super Bowl is not the best storyline that you can come up with? I think that there's a case that the league could lean Brock Purdy for the same reasons that you would Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I agree. It's the best story there is out there right now that I can think of. Brock Purdy could be comeback player of the year. Also, like I know the guy. I forget his name.
It's going to be DeMar Hamlin.
Hamlin.
All it took was one play, and the guy died on a football field. He literally died. All right.
Yeah,
that's insane. It's just the fact that he was able to get back onto the football field is.
But I mean, MVP, comeback player of the year, Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl champion, all those are possible for Brock Purdy coming from where he came from. I did not see it coming. I know a lot of people want to say, I knew you didn't know this. I really doubt if you predicted that this was going to happen for Brock Purdy in season 2, you were just hoping. Yeah, you didn't see this coming. There's no way to see this coming.
Yeah. And no, listen, I mean, there's people that deserve credit. You know what I mean? People that were really big on him and didn't waver and all that.
Sure.
Congratulations to you guys. But
this caliber I'm talking about.
You didn't think MVP. You didn't think MVP. Like nobody would have thought that in their right mind. You'd have been laughed off of everywhere probably if you would have said something like that. You'd have been a crazy person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, this
Yeah,
isn't.
it is. It's a huge surprise, and it's awesome. It's awesome that he's a 49er. It's awesome that the 49ers are as good as they are. And I would argue right now, if you're a fan of any other team, it's not as good as being a 49er fan. It goes back to the Harbaugh days. Who's got it better than us? I would say nobody right now. There's nobody that has it better than us. So,
Yeah.
that being said, Ryan, that is the Tuesday show. I'm surprised your drink's not frozen over at this point. That is crazy. You're sitting in like 30-degree room, but go get warm. Go get in your house. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much. I'll be back tonight with my guy Sunil. So make sure you stay tapped in here at Last Second Sports. Give Ryan some love. Ryan G. Hensley Show. Go tap in there. And until next time, peace.